Cincinnati's first settlers made their home on the large flat basin that now includes downtown Over-the-Rhine and the West End. By the 1850s, the city's population was too large for the basin alone, and people started moving to the city's surrounding hills. Horse cars were the first form of public transportation, with operation beginning on September 14, 1859. Although horse cars had been running in New Orleans since 1835, very few other cities introduced rail transit in the form or horse or mule-drawn cars until the 1850s, and in 1859 Cincinnati was still one of the first few U.S. cities with such transit service. However, horse-drawn vehicles were inadequate because the animals would fatigue and the hills were impossible to climb in bad weather. Cities with hilly terrain such as Cincinnati and San Francisco began adopting cable cars because they were faster and more reliable than horses. Horse cars were the earliest form of city rail transit. One or two horses propelled light, boxy tram cars over tracks buried in the streets. Only the tops of the iron rails could be seen. The rest of the track structure was below the surface of the pavement. The rails offered a smooth, low-friction surface so that a heavy load could be propelled with a minimal power source. The cars moved slowly at rarely more than 6 miles per hour. They were costly to operate and rarely ventured much beyond the city limits. The very wealthy did not require public transit and could easily afford a private carriage. The poor walked by necessity, but there was a limited demand for getting around by semi-public means. It was understood almost from the first day of the street railway that the horse was the weak link in its operational chain. Its limited power meant speeds were never more than a walk. It could be walked no more than 4 hours per day and was likely to perform for only about 14 miles. Illness and foot problems meant idle days in the stable hospital. The horse needed help surmounting hills and reduced hours in hot weather. This meant that 9 horses were needed to operate one car. Hence, large reserves of horses were needed to keep cars running. This also meant large stables and staff to house and service the herd of the high-bred and mettlesome beasts. Horses required considerable rest, grooming, and high-grade feed. Edison remarked that they were the poorest motor ever made and yielded a thermal efficiency of only 2%. The Victorian era is often called the Age of Steam, and it was in most areas, but local transport remained horse-propelled until the 1890s, when internal combustion and electric motors were harnessed for this service. City streets were filled with carriages, wagons, and horse cars. The city barn was constructed in 1896 to house horses that pulled the city's early streetcars when the system was extended out to Clifton and Avondale from the initial expansion out of the downtown basin further up the hill. Located on Vine Street, the building later became a storage and maintenance shed for electric streetcars that replaced the horses in the early 20th century. Before that system as well was phased out in favor of buses just after World War II. The building was then home to several functions before becoming vacant, and today has been decorated with murals that are inspired by wildlife at the nearby Cincinnati Zoo.